Welcome to this episode where we're going to be looking at the level of courage. Now, I'm super excited to be doing this episode because we have now worked our way through all of the negative emotions, which is really powerful. From this level on, this whole letting go journey is going to start to accelerate. And in the book Letting Go, David Hawkins talks about the fact that the levels, which I'll be showing here on the screen now, they don't just increase in addition, they actually increase in intensity and power logarithmically, which means that there is a multiplication of power as you move up through each one of these levels. So you might wonder, what does that mean? What it means is that with every step up this ladder that you take on your letting go journey, with every step you take in raising your level of consciousness, you are becoming multiples more powerful, not just fractions, not just increments. You're becoming multiples more powerful. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a future episode, but I just want you to know that this journey and this method in particular is so worth your time and so worth your attention. And we're going to get into a bit of that in this episode, what that's going to start to look like for you. So before we go any further, I hope that you've gone through and watched all of the other videos to get yourself up to this point, and not just watched them, but actually applied the lessons in each one of those episodes, because that's going to make this a much more powerful experience for you. If you haven't done that, you're still going to get some value from this, from understanding the concepts, and that's still going to help you on this journey, but it's going to be much more powerful if you've gone and actually done those exercises. See, I myself am being very aware of actually making sure as I shoot each one of these videos that I've really given myself over, I've really surrendered to facing each one of those levels, facing each one of those negative emotional states, and I'm really putting in the work myself to make sure that I have fully surrendered those emotions. And that's not to say that I'm finished with all of them yet, but it is to say that I've started the process, and I definitely am feeling a lot different to what I did when I shot that first video. I'm getting so much value from this process of just sharing this, which is why I can say, go through this process yourself. Do it thoroughly. Give yourself the time, the space to go through and get it done, because it's going to make a huge difference in your life. So, as I said, courage is where we cross that tipping point and we actually start to spiral upwards naturally. We're going to start to find the gravitational pull is going to be pulling us upwards instead of down, as with those negative emotions from pride all the way down to shame. Wherever we're in that state, where we're in that level of consciousness, we're going to be finding ourselves getting naturally pulled back down, because our unconscious mind, the part of us which is really running this whole show, we think it's our conscious mind, but our unconscious mind is actually the background program which is running everything that's going on. It is going to automatically pull us down to face these emotions because we can't access those higher states until we've cleared out that junk, until we've done our shadow work, until we have resolved the conflicts that the emotions of shame, guilt, fear, pride keep us stuck in. So you can't skip this. You can't rush through this journey. You've got to do this properly. So having said that, let's get into it. Courage. The hallmark of courage is the knowledge and feeling I can. It's a positive state in which we feel assured, skillful, adequate, capable, alive, loving and giving, with an overall zest for life. We are capable of humor, activity, confidence and clarity. In this state, we feel centered, balanced, flexible, happy, independent and self-sufficient. We can be inventive, creative and open. In courage, there's a lot of energy, action, letting go, capacity to be there, to be spontaneous, resilient, resourceful and cheerful. In this state, we can be very effective in the world. The courage to let go. The level of courage is very helpful in the mechanism of surrender. In courage, we know I can look at my feelings. I don't have to be afraid of my feelings anymore. I can handle them. I can take responsibility for them. I can learn how to accept them and be free from them. I'm willing to take risks, to let go of old points of view, and to explore new ones. I'm willing to be joyous and share my experience with others. I experience myself as willing and able. It's often easy to jump from any of the lower feelings up to courage merely by affirming our courage to look at and handle our feelings. The mere willingness to look at and begin to handle them increases our self-esteem. If, for instance, we have a fear and we're unwilling to look at it, then we feel diminished and our self-esteem is lowered. If we're willing to look at that fear, examine it, acknowledge its presence, see how it's inhibited our life, and begin to surrender it, then our self-esteem increases whether the fear disappears or not. So again, we're not completely done with the negative emotions, but we're coming at them from a completely different space, completely different level. We all know that it takes courage to face fear. We champion the people who face their fear and attempt to do something about it. Such courage is one of the characteristics of nobility and makes a person truly great. Despite all their negative programming and despite all of their fear, courageous people go forward in life with no guarantee and not even the knowledge that things are going to get better. So courage increases our self-respect and brings to us the respect of others. We no longer need to feel ashamed. Let's look at the example of a man who suffered from a lifelong terror of heights. He had worked on being free of the fear for several years and it had gotten much better, but there was still plenty of it left. This was evident when he went to the Grand Canyon with a friend. At first, he stood back about 6 feet from the ledge. In previous years, he wouldn't have even gone within a block of it. Now he stood there hesitantly. The friend took his hand, saying, "Come on over to the edge with me." And so he did. He kept surrendering on the fear as he walked forward and found that he could actually stand right next to the edge, although admittedly not without still feeling considerable discomfort. When they left the edge of the canyon, the friend looked at him approvingly and said, "Well, at least you did it. I know how much courage that took." Even though he had not totally overcome the fear, by transcending an inner barrier, he'd earned his own self-respect and the respect of others. When we have these breakthrough experiences, we begin to perceive our fear differently and we stop being ashamed of it. Have you noticed that with so many of our fears, there's this subtle shame attached? Well, as we get to this level of courage, it's no longer a shameful thing. The fear is just fear, We just accept that we got fears. Everyone's got fears. And that enables us to face them, even if that means facing them in front of other people. We stop allowing it to invalidate our true worth. It increases our inner strength and our self-approval. In due time, the underlying fears which require courage to overcome diminish to the point that we move on to acceptance, self-empowerment. On the level of courage, the emphasis is on doing. We already know that we're capable of providing for our own needs and for those of others, and we know that if we're willing to put forth the effort, we can obtain what we want. Thus, people on the level of courage are the doers of the world. Because we can only give away what we ourselves already have, people on the level of courage are able to be supportive and encouraging of others. This is because they're able to give as well as receive, and there's a balance between giving and receiving that occurs naturally. The levels of consciousness up to this point are concerned primarily with gain. Now, on the level of courage, there is greater power and energy. We have the ability to give to others because other people are no longer being looked at primarily as a means of help, survival, or support. When we're in the state of courage, we sense our own inner power, strength, and self-worth. We know that we have the capacity to make a real difference in the world, not just gain something from it from ourselves. So that switch has taken place from negative orientation to positive orientation, which includes switching from an orientation of just taking and giving and extracting and getting to now we become an energy source to others. We become givers. We become like that radiant sun, which is energizing those around us rather than sucking the life out of them. Because of the inner self-confidence, we're much less concerned with security. The emphasis is no longer on what people have, but upon what they do and have become. With courage, there's the willingness to take chances and to let go of former securities. There's the willingness to grow and benefit from new experiences. This involves the capacity to admit mistakes without indulging in guilt and self-recrimination. Our sense of self-worth is not diminished by looking at areas in our own life that need improvement. A lot of the time when we're on those lower levels, again, it's a source of shame. It's a source of fear to look at aspects of ourselves which we need to work on, which we need to take responsibility for. But now on the level of courage, we are no longer affected in that same way. We start to see that as an opportunity. As a result, energy, time, and effort are put into self-improvement. On this level, statements of intention and purpose are much more powerful, and envisioned results tend to manifest. We're much more enterprising and creative because our energies are not drained by the constant preoccupation with emotional or physical survival. Because of greater flexibility, there's a willingness to examine issues with a view to changing overall meaning and context. We're seeing things from a new perspective, completely recontextualizing old problems and patterns so that, traumas of the past, dramas in our relationships, disasters that may have happened in our life are no longer seen as disasters, but maybe we're now seeing them as lessons or even opportunities to grow. Because of greater flexibility, there is a change of overall meaning and context. There's a willingness to risk shifting paradigms. Now, this is a very big thing for a lot of people because, a paradigm is literally the way that you see reality, and the ego is naturally resistant to change. So whenever there's a new worldview that threatens how we've always seen things, there's going to be fear, because the ego wants to maintain its old status quo. It wants to survive. That's the function of the ego, is survival, to maintain its sense of identity. And this whole paradigm thing, whilst if we shift our paradigm, it might mean that we're opening ourselves up to more opportunity financially, or in relationships, or in just being happier. The ego doesn't like that, because it wants to survive. But here on the level of courage, we become willing to shift our paradigm, to shift our worldview. Old beliefs will fall away, and we're willing to look at the truth directly rather than cling to those old ways of seeing things. Paradigms are worldviews, and they're only limited by what we view as possible. Maybe when you're a kid, you got told that anything's possible. Anything's possible if you set your mind to it. And then as we get older, we start to forget that and start to settle into these worldviews and paradigms and cultural programs. And our view of what is possible starts to shrink to this very narrow band of what everyone else says is possible. But this begins to change. As old ways of looking at things are challenged, our worldview begins to stretch and expand. What was previously considered to be impossible becomes possible, and eventually is experienced as a new dimension of reality. There's the capacity to look within ourselves, to examine our belief systems, ask questions, and seek new solutions. On the level of courage, we're willing to take self-improvement courses, learn consciousness techniques, and risk the journey within to seek our own true self, the inner reality. There's a willingness to experience uncertainty, periods of confusion, and temporary upset, because underneath the temporary discomfort, we have a long-term transcendent goal. The mind that's operating on the level of courage makes statements such as, "I can handle it, we'll make it, the job will get done, we can see this through, all things shall pass." If we test a person's muscle strength with kinesiology when in a state of courage, the level of "I can handle it," they will test positive and remain strong to our challenge. Although there's still vulnerability to negative thoughts or energies, such as those that emanate from fluorescent lights or artificial sweeteners, the bioenergy field is more radiant than that of the lower negative states. Because courage is a stronger, more resilient energy field, physical illnesses are less likely to be a predominant aspect of life. I remember when I found myself doing a lot of letting go. It was actually earlier this year. A major life event happened, and as I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, the Letting Go book came back across my path, and I started studying it intensely and applying it every day, really just fully surrendering to the process. And amazingly, a long-term condition which I had, which was a digestive issue, and it was accompanied by, it was never diagnosed for me, but this was my experience, a chronic fatigue, tiredness, brain fog, and really high levels of food sensitivity. And then I went through that process of really deep surrender. This is the first time that I surrendered on a very deep level, and a lot of food intolerances as well. And I felt something physically shift in my body around that time. This was over a course of weeks, and then towards the end it was days, and then there was some really deep surrendering going on, and I felt something physically shift in my body once I'd let go of this particular attachment. And I knew at that point that I could start eating different foods that I hadn't eaten for years, literally years. And I could feel the difference in my body. And I went and, I remember I went and made myself some pasta with wheat pasta, just regular pasta, which I hadn't eaten for years. And in previous months when I'd had just even little things like little bits of dairy, just experimenting here and there, there was like an immediate reaction. But now I went and ate this huge bowl of pasta and there was no reaction at all, like zero reaction. When I remembered from years ago, I have like a little bit of pasta and immediately it's just like fatigue, itchy skin, my digestive system just got all screwed up, and I would feel like brain fog. Sometimes I couldn't even see properly, but none of that happened. And that's when I knew that some big shifts had taken place in my body. So this is what happens when we start to move into the level of courage. There may be chronic, here's an add-on to that. There may be chronic residuals of illnesses that originated from the lower levels of consciousness, but they're generally not stabilized. They're no longer gripping us in the same way that they did before. In courage, there's an overall sense of strength and well-being. Awareness of others. The lifestyle on this level shows a balance of work, enjoyment, and love. There's not the necessity for overambition or workaholism, although people on the level of courage are capable of considerable energy output if the situation requires it. Because of the letting go of so much negativity, there's a desire and a capacity to love and to have loving relationships. These now assume equal importance with efforts towards survival. There's vocational security, and in the work area, there's concern for the welfare of others. People on this level characteristically state they want jobs which will be of some benefit to the world. They want to feel that there's more meaning to their job than just a salary. Personal growth is important, and there's the awareness on this level that our life is either positively or negatively influencing those around us. On the lower levels of consciousness, which are characterized by egotism, there's so much concern with self-gain and there's so little energy or thought given to our effect on others. On the level of courage, we no longer identify solely with the small self. The world is no longer seen as the depriving or punishing bad parent. Instead, the world is seen as challenging and presenting opportunities for growth, development, and new experiences. Thus, this level is characterized by optimism and the feeling that with the correct facts, education, and orientation, sooner or later, most problems can be worked out satisfactorily. So our problem-solving skills are actually jumping up to a new level here as well. Because we've got the patience, we've got the belief, we've let go of so much of the apathy and the depression and the sadness which just plants ideas in our mind like, oh, what's the point? Or this can't be solved. This starts to fall away, and our problem-solving skills increase as well, which leads to more vocational success. The lower levels limit our consciousness to personal concern, but on this level, social issues become important and energy is expended to help overcome social problems and to be helpful to those less fortunate. Therefore, generosity becomes possible, not just financially, but also in generosity of attitude. Pleasure is derived from the championing of causes and from supporting the endeavors of others. This energy creates new jobs, businesses, industries, and political and scientific solutions. Education, although not always in the academic sense, becomes important. On the level of courage, we really start becoming conscious. It dawns on us that we have the freedom and the capacity to choose. We no longer have to be the victim, and freedom in the psychological, emotional, and spiritual sense is possible. Therefore, much less rigidity is present, and because of flexibility and the capacity of concern and genuine love for others, people on this level make good parents, bosses, employees, and citizens. And I just want to pause there and throw in a little piece on spiral dynamics. If you have watched any of my videos on spiral dynamics or you've studied spiral dynamics, what we see on the level of courage is we're actually emerging into the yellow stage, into tier 2 of the spiral. And this yellow stage, which comes after the green stage, which if we're talking about chakras, is associated with the stage of opening the heart. As we move up from pride to courage, we're moving into this yellow stage, becoming more functional, flexible, and flowing in the way that we are. And as it says here, there's much less rigidity. And because of the flexibility we have and the capacity for concern and the genuine love for others, we become much better parents, bosses, employees, and citizens. We become much better problem solvers. And we're actually, for the first time, really starting to consolidate love in a functional way. See, on the green stage, when we first start opening our heart and we become basically hippies, there's so much expansion of consciousness that happens here, so much awareness begins to open up. But if we stay just in the green stage and we don't learn to integrate that with the higher levels, and really what keeps us trapped on the green level is pride. If you've done any research on spiral dynamics, the survival conflict of green, or the evolution conflict that has to be overcome on the level of green, is actually pride, funnily enough, because the green stage judges all of the stages below it. And so in courage, we're moving, we're letting go of that pride, and we're opening up to this new level of consciousness. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, I'm going to be making videos in future about how all these different models kind of integrate. It's really, really beautiful once you start to see it. So there's a capacity to put ourselves in another's place and a concern for the feelings of others as well as their overall welfare. Although the lower negative feelings still tend to occur, they do not predominate or determine one's lifestyle. That is, we do it even though we're scared. People on this level are the backbone of the country. They're the people we turn to when it's necessary to do so for the common good. They're dependable and can be counted on because of their willingness to accept responsibility. On this level, there's a social conscience and humanitarianism. As the basis of moral decisions, guilt takes a back seat to the welfare of others. It is from this level that we get such sayings as success breeds success. Because of adequate functioning, there's positive feedback, which reinforces confidence and allows greater self-exploration as well as exploration of the world. Now, I just want to pause there as well. You'll see here on the chart, as we progress to the higher levels, imagine almost like a tree that's growing, right? So as we grow to higher levels of consciousness, not only do we expand up the ladder, but we also, our roots go down deeper and start to deal with these more negative emotions on deeper levels. And this is what, again, in the book, Letting Go, if you read through to the end, which we'll get to, David Hawkins talks about how as he's reaching these levels of acceptance, joy, love, his energy starts to rise to such a high level. And he says, because of the power that he's got on those levels, he's able to then go down deeper and face darker shadows, which is a part of this process. He's able to start confronting on much deeper levels those emotions of guilt, fear, shame, and starting to get to some of the real cause of the conflicts that actually create the ego. So as you're going on this journey, you're going not just up, but you're going down deeper too, because your capacity to handle negativity, which we usually would just suppress and completely push out of our awareness, our capacity to handle that gets much, much more stronger and more powerful. So I know for me right now, some of my recent experiences have really been dealing with deeper levels of guilt and shame. That's what I've been dealing with. because as I move into this level of courage more, that's the depth that I'm going to in my own surrender on a deeper level. So, although effort is still required to accomplish goals, it's much less than on lower levels. There's greater satisfaction and gratification because there's greater reward with less effort. Our power is increasing than that which would be required to overcome fear. There's much greater capacity not only to seek help, but to be able to utilize it and to benefit from it. Money is used in a much more constructive manner, and there is concern with how the expenditures will affect the life of others. Money is not spent solely for self-gratification, self-aggrandizement, or self-fortification. Rather, it's seen as a tool for accomplishment. Money is used, this level is the one at which true spiritual awareness becomes possible, because of the emergence from egotism and the relinquishment of the identification with the small self. There's an experiencing of higher energies and the hope of increased awareness. On the lower levels, God is viewed from the emotional coloration of that level. There's a really interesting point here. Thus, in apathy, the whole relationship with God is hopeless, if it can be considered at all. On the level of grief, one feels hopelessly separated from any help from God. When overcome with guilt, the person feels undeserving of any relationship with God, and punishment is expected rather than love. And if we're looking at spiral dynamics, this is where red is starting to emerge into blue. God is seen as punishing. And again, the evolutionary conflict of the blue stage is guilt, right? And once we relinquish guilt, we start to move up. Or once we start to suppress that guilt, we start to move up into orange, where we become much more self-orientated. On the level of fear, the fear may be so great that the problem of God cannot even be faced, so that the subject is blotted out of consciousness. We see this on orange, which begins to deny God or just push it out of awareness, where we become scientifically minded, materialistic in nature. God is viewed as fearful, punishing, avenging, jealous, and angry. On the level of anger, God is viewed as depriving, arbitrary, capricious, and failing. On the level of pride, there is egotism about one's religious or spiritual position, characterized by rigidity, inflexibility, intolerance, proneness to exclusivity, bigotry, clannishness, religious argumentation, and warring. On the level of courage, we're willing to take responsibility for our religious or spiritual position. The increased awareness often results in the emergence of the spiritual seeker, and the pursuit of truth in its religious or spiritual sense truly awakens. This may result in a reaffirmation of our previous position, but now from a totally new viewpoint, that of choice. It may bring about changes which may be either slow and gradual or sudden. On this level, there's the awakening of consciousness and the realization that our beliefs and views are now a result of our choice, not just a result of previous blind programming. There's a search for meaning, and this may occur on the level of ethics and humanitarianism, rather than in the area specifically denoted as formal religion. We investigate our social function and role in the world, and we inquire as to the value of our lives not only to ourselves but also to others. Carl Jung said that the healthy personality is equally balanced between work, play, love, and an aspect of personality called spirituality, which we could also define as the search for meaning and value. These investigations bring inner upsets. So again, here's the more of that shadow work happening, more of those depths being faced, but also moments of acceptance and peace. There are moments of intuitive understanding which beckon us on to continue the quest, to find out if there's anything beyond just the physical and material world and its ever-changing phenomena. This level of consciousness is a good one from which to look at and let go of more negative feelings. On this level, we have the energy, capacity, self-confidence, and willingness to acknowledge to acquire know-how and undergo the necessary steps of learning. On this level, there's a desire for self-improvement and the realization that better states of mind are possible. The level of courage knows that it's not necessary to endure the pain and suffering of the negative emotions or their interferences with the satisfactions of life. In courage, we're no longer willing to pay the cost of negativity. We're concerned about the effects of our negative feelings on the welfare of others with whom we're closely associated. Most people who've learned the letting go technique will continue to use it until they've reached this level of consciousness. On this level, their major life problems are now under control. They're experiencing vocational satisfaction and success. Material wants are supplied. Major problems in relationships have been straightened out. They're no longer consciously experiencing pain and suffering, and there is satisfaction from having grown and developed in certain areas. When we're comfortable, there's a temptation to stop using the technique and only resume it in emergency situations, or when negative feelings again become painful and necessitate our attention. However, there is much more yet to be had. Because there's always a feeling going on which can be surrendered, the continuation of the process will lead to greater and greater benefits. Continual surrender will bring about constant, subtle changes, especially on the levels of subtle awareness and in our capacity for love. Previously, we had likened the radiation of love, which stems from our higher aspect, to the energy of the sunlight. We noted that as the dark clouds of negativity are removed, this energy and our capacity to accept it and radiate it outward increases progressively. On the level of courage, our capacity to love is now much stronger, and it has the power to support and encourage others, lending strength to that which is positive and constructive in them. Assisting their development brings us the pleasure of watching their growth and increasing happiness. This capacity within us can grow even stronger. It can become even more powerful and self-rewarding, as well as more beneficial to others. We can utilize courage to reinforce our desire to grow beyond our present state, because on this level we are already getting inklings that there's something within us that we had hitherto unsuspected. These are indicated by those sudden episodes of perfect stillness and peace in which we have great clarity, understanding, and heightened sensitivity to beauty. We discover that it was through the music and not because of it that we experience our mind going suddenly still. And in that moment of stillness, we were allowed to experience a greater dimension. There may be fleeting seconds in which we feel a complete identification and oneness with others, as though there were no separation. These are the moments of breaking through into the experiencing of our real inner self. The memory of those moments is never forgotten. When they first start to happen, we don't know what they mean. We think they're just accidental, just due to chance. We attribute the feeling to external events such as the beauty of a sunset, a symphonic passage, or a loving gesture, or maybe some plant medicine or psychedelics, if that's part of your spiritual journey. But as we investigate further, we find that these were only the circumstances that allowed something else to happen. These were not the cause. They allowed a certain stillness of the mind to take place, and because of that stillness, we were allowed a moment in which we were able to experience something other than the chatter of our own mind with its incessant, restless play of sensations, feelings, thoughts, emotions, and memories. In the moments when time seems to stand still, we get a glimpse of what's possible. These moments are so rewarding that they're treasured for a lifetime. When they occur, something is experienced that is very impressive. Could it be that beyond the turbulence of the world and our own mind, there is silence, a realm of peace that is always waiting? So that's it for this episode. That's the level of courage, and that gives you a really good idea of what you can start to expect when you move into this level. I hope that excites you, and I hope you can begin to see what is possible for you now as you go on this journey, as you put this technique into action and start to experience some of these amazing benefits. So I've had a couple of questions on mindfulness and meditation and how that kind of works with letting go. And I am going to make a video on this specifically. This is a topic that needs some attention because a lot of people I've spoken to, and even for myself, get confused about, am I letting go? Am I not letting go? How do I know when I'm letting go? What's the difference between letting go and meditation, or all these other kind of techniques? I'm gonna address this, but it needs a whole video to itself because there's a lot of subtle little things that I've discovered through my journey of doing this and experimenting with all kinds of different techniques. So for now, just know that's coming, and just keep practicing the basic, simple technique, and actually set aside some time each day. First thing when you wake up in the morning, spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then before you go to sleep at night, spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes just sitting there or lying there, feeling all the feelings in your body and moving your attention to whatever feelings are most intense, and really just letting them be there. Noticing where you've got any tension or any resistance in your body to those feelings, and just breathing into that resistance or that tension, and just consciously starting to relax those areas so that the feelings underneath, which are trying to be felt and trying to be expressed, whether they be fear or guilt or shame or desire or pride, letting those feelings just be felt in your body. That's the most basic way that you can start to do this. Also, I'm going to start bringing out a couple of meditations, guided meditations that you can use to guide you on this process, or which I think will help. So stay tuned for that. Exercise for this video is, if you haven't already, implement that habit. Morning and night, start to do the letting go technique. Set aside a specific time to start practicing it, and you're going to experience your growth starts expanding exponentially. So that's it from me. Post your questions or comments below, hit the like button for me, share this video with a friend, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, Acceptance. Until then.